I never thought I was the kind of person to do this job. Because I think of myself as rather humble, I'm fairly awkward, and I'm having a hard time taking myself too seriously. And I hate being in the center of attention. But I have been surprised that these characteristics can rather be an asset than a liability. And the voice in my head that told me that I might not be right for the job were actually wrong. I'm Corinna Falusi, CCO at Mother in New York. And my job, as I see it, is to create an environment for my people that stifles this voice that says, you cannot. And instead, encourages the voice that says, of course you can. So, today I'm going to share with you my thoughts about how to create and manage a creative environment and creative thinking. But I'm not talking about any type of creativity. I'm talking about the type of creativity that leads to really iconic and famous ideas and solves really, really complicated problems. But why does this matter? Because I believe that a culture of constant invention and innovation is the only way for any company to actually stay alive. To me, inspiring innovation begins to create the right culture at any company. So, I'm first going to talk about my perspective on the creative mindset, and then second, I'm going to share 5 ways with you that I believe make creatives be creative. Before I do that, I would first like to talk about a few misconceptions we have when we talk about the creative culture. What does it actually look like when we imagine a creative culture? That's a very simple thing. I did the obvious thing I could do when looking this up. The place to go is Getty Images. So that's exactly what I did. I typed in creative office in Google and Getty Images, and this is what I found. It is a group of people around a table having a really great time when coming up with ideas. Or look at this. Clicker is not clicking, here we go. It's an even larger group of people sitting around a table having a really great time when coming with ideas. Wait for this one. It's a group of women. Getty Images has discovered women are creative too, and they sit around a large table coming up with really great ideas, having a lot of fun. So following these preconceptions, logically when companies think about creating a creative office environment, they do exactly this. They get a really long table that people can sit around, work together, have a lot of fun and come up with ideas. Or the other obvious thing is they get cheerful, colorful graffiti, or they get the obligatory ping pong table. I know you have that too. There's nothing wrong with these things. This is wonderful things to have. But does this really spark creativity? And even more so, and even more important to me, does a creative culture need to be a happy culture? Or is this another misconception? So to understand what creativity or creatives really need, I would love to first look into the process of being creative and how that feels like. Who better to listen to than Slavoj Žižek? I'm secretly in love with this man. Slavoj is a philosopher, a social critic, and a filmmaker. And this is his point of view. I tell you what he said. Oh? I think somebody's trying this again. If you can lip read, I think you can anticipate what he says. Anyway, don't need him. In short, what he says is that happiness is not part of the creative process. It just isn't. Coming up with an idea is absolutely painful. It's true. And that is true for an advertising creative as much as it is true for any other creative, a writer, an author, a dancer. It is painful. We start with nothing and the pressure is overwhelming. Happiness does come eventually, but it comes at the end after you had the idea as fulfillment. So my second favorite misconception is that large group of people come up with a firework of ideas. The more people you pack in a group brainstorm, the more ideas you get. This is a fairly absurd initiative. The idea stems from the Mad Men era, which already shows why this is bullshit, by a man called Alex Osborne. There is research for over 60 years, and thousands of studies that show that group brainstorms are not working. This is my favorite article from the Harvard Business Review, collecting all of these, and it simply states, group brainstorms are a complete waste of time. That's no surprise to me. I have not met one creative in my whole life who likes group brainstorms. It's a pure act of desperation. When we're running out of time, we grab all bodies from the office, lock them in a room, and then we expect magic to happen. It certainly does not. It's absurd. And why it is even more absurd is because when we think of what it actually looks and feels like to be creative, it's just not that. Being creative is actually a very introverted and inwards process. I know we live in a world where being extroverted is very celebrated, but we can't ignore that being creative is a quiet and sometimes very introverted and inwards process. As a teen, I spent many years in the dark and humid basement of my parents, and I used to paint and draw a lot. And despite this quite horrible and dark environment, I remember this time as the most creatively fulfilling time in my life. But let's look at some other images from people that are very famous and known for being creative and famous. This is Virginia Woolf writing. This is Christoph Niemann illustrating. And this is Yayoi Kusama painting some of her dots. This is what being creative looks like. So now I would love to talk to you about 5 ways that I believe help creatives be more creative. No, not more creative, just creative. The first one is, don't hire yourself. To not hire myself, to me, is one of the most important things I live by. Because if we do hire ourselves, we all know what happens. That's the past of our industry. White men hire white men and do white man work. That clearly doesn't lead to diverse and original ideas. So I really try to do the exact opposite. A long, long time ago, I lived in Amsterdam, and it was at a Dutch company called Strawberry Frog. It had about 60 employees. And out of that 60 employees, only one single person was Dutch. I shall mention he was the IT guy. And that wonderful mix of nationalities and cultures created an environment unlike anything I had ever seen before. It generated incredible, unusual ideas, and it felt like a hub of enormous creativity. This is not something that only one company did by accident. This is actually something the Dutch government supports with tax breaks. This might sound absurd, but it certainly makes sense for them. They do not do this only because it creates a bigger body of ideas. They do this because they know it leads to business success. So that experience I had in Amsterdam, it stuck with me for the rest of my life. And I since tried to recreate it over and over again. And the biggest part of this is to not hire myself. So I do try to hire misfits and then combine them with the polar opposite. But that's not always an easy thing to achieve, and it's not an easy thing to maintain, because it actually creates much more work for me. Sometimes you have to hire somebody that you are not really comfortable with. Like 2 weeks ago in my office, we discussed a new hire, and we discussed the personality of that person and the character. And we agreed on that it should be somebody that's completely different from me. And I said, I think we need to hire somebody that I don't like. And that's the brief. Hire somebody I don't like. I know it's going to be wonderful. So once you hired people with so many different cultural differences and personalities, it's one thing to bring those people together, but it's another thing to deal with the quite explosive outcomes of those combinations. There will be tension, there will be explosions, but I think that's all worth it. Because I know if we do this, the ideas get more original and we get a much broader range of ideas. So here are a few examples. What happens when you combine an introverted South African woman with an extroverted writer and a fairly pushy mom and personal assistant? You get this. This is the latest project for the New York Public Library called Insta Novels. The project is to, oh, it was one person clapping, I like it. Insta Novels, it's an idea to use Instagram stories for the first time as an e-reader. What happens if you combine a gay man with a queer man and a woman who describes herself as a bulldog from New York? You get this. It's the blood shirt, a shirt printed with the blood of gay men. It's a mother project we launched this year to raise awareness for the fact that gay men are not allowed to donate blood in the US, which seems like utter bullshit to me. If you combine two very calm, thoughtful Brazilians, an intensely annoying, ambitious Brazilian, a Spanish art director sitting there, and a Japanese producer, you get this. It is a flag for the millions of refugees that have not a place to call their home. So the least we can do, give them a flag that they can stand for. Next, I would love to talk to you about the importance of emotional freedom with Let Them Cry. I don't know how many other jobs are out there that are so personal. It's like writing a book and nobody wants to read it. It's a horrifying thought. And that's what makes us vulnerable. Creatives are emotional and we are volatile. It's just how it is. Even the creatives that are overly confident and loud, they are too. I know because I see them every single day. And a while ago, I remember when I promoted a creative who was known for being particularly imbalanced. And I hope he's not here today. But when I promoted him, the account lead at that time came to me and he was like, Corinna, what did you do? He's emotionally unstable. And I said, of course he's emotionally unstable. He's a genius. You know what my point is. I think being sensitive, being emotional, being neurotic are beautiful characteristics. It's something that shouldn't only be accepted, it's something that needs to be celebrated. Because these people are the secret sauce to great work. So, this is what I believe I owe my people, to watch and not judge them, to accept them for how they are and who they are, and to fight to the death for them so they know I have their back. And if I can do this, then they can be at their best. So my role is to accept, but that's worth absolutely nothing if people around me are not accepting as well. And I had to learn a lot since Me Too. I think we all did, that it's even more important to look carefully and confront people if they are not accepting. And even further, to sometimes remove people if they just can't figure themselves out. So, in summary, to me, one of the most important things to help a creative culture is to encourage and to protect emotional freedom. I would love to talk to you about how to bring some structure within the creative chaos. Super simple, say what you think. I grew up in the south of Germany. I'm not sure how many of you have been there. It's a place and a culture where you only speak when you have something really important to say. And when you say it in a very short, blunt, and simple way. Even living in the US for over 15 years, the polite American culture has not been able to completely take that from me. I remember my first client presentation. I had just fallen out of a plane from Europe, and it was a conference call, presented work, and the client seemed excited. We hung up, and I said, "This was great." And the account lead said, "The presentation was a complete disaster." Creatives deserve and need clear feedback. That's really what we deserve to have. But there is something else to it, because that is especially true for young creatives. Whenever I do one of those exit interviews, or whenever you look at actually the data of young people leaving, it's always the same thing. They never leave because they want a raise or because they want a promotion. The most heard reason is because they're lacking clear feedback. Just imagine in our offices, there's people sitting, they do not know where to stand, and they do not know how to get better. So while being too negative doesn't help the creative process, not being clear or sometimes blunt doesn't help it either. This does not only apply to people we work with. I think it equally applies to people that we work with beyond that, our clients, our vendors, and our partners. I do believe if we are honest with them, they're more likely to buy our ideas. So a couple of years ago, I worked on a campaign for Coke Zero. It was called Drinkable Advertising. The idea was to make every single type of media drinkable, from radio to tweets to out of home to God knows what. Clearly a production challenge. And I remember sitting in a room with my client, and she said, "Corinna, can we pull this off? Can we do this?" And I said, "Yes, we can, but it's going to be horrible." And she did one of her breathing exercises, it was her thing, and then she agreed on that we would do this. It was 6 weeks of a horrible production, even more so than we had imagined, but it led to an outcome we were proud of. I'm convinced if we wouldn't have had this conversation before, we wouldn't have made it through the production, we wouldn't have gotten the work, and even the relationship would not have survived this. So it is crucial to be blunt with each other. My next point is, how do you shock creatives into being more creative? Call this shock and awe. Creative people are unhappy, constantly unhappy. If a creative doesn't complain, she or he is probably not talented. So when a creative comes to me and is particularly unhappy, there's only one thing to do. You shock them with a seemingly impossible task. Give them something that they themselves don't think they're ready for, and I promise they will come to life. A quite long time ago, I worked with a junior called Justin. Justin came to me, it was one of these conversations where he was particularly unhappy. He was ready to leave. I really believed in Justin's talents, and I really believed in him, so I did the only thing I could think of. I gave them a seemingly impossible task. I told him he would go on a plane, economy flight, to India to shoot in a slum of Mumbai. It was a project for a charity account. And let's remember, Justin has never been on a production by himself. And I remember his face, and I remember my thoughts. I was not quite sure what work I would get back. I was in fact not sure if I would ever see him again. But I did. So this is Justin in the Mumbai at a school. He's hard to picture because he's covered up by these kids. Justin had an unusual, wonderful experience. He made friends with the kids. He came back with a beautiful piece of work. And even better so, since then he has made a great career as a creative director. The best thing after this for me was that me trusting him made us closer. I changed jobs twice after that, and he followed me both times. So those challenging tasks can be literally anything. You can send a junior far away on a shoot that seems impossible. You can put them in front or in charge of the internship program. It's a real challenge. Or you can lock them in a room with a new client. Anything works, as long as it feels scary enough. When a creative is sent out on an adventure, they come to life and they really grow, and they find things they find like talents and confidence that they didn't think they had before. And that confidence leads to great work. So far, we put a team of misfits together. Then we try to accept their neuroses. Then we add some structure by giving them clear feedback, shock them into being even more creative. So the final thing for me left to do is to step out of the way. So there's a paradox, obviously, in leading by getting out of the way. However, when you think of some of the most creative genius that we know, I'm sure they didn't have a boss telling them what to do. I'm quite sure Kandinsky didn't have somebody tell him to draw more abstractly. And I think you cannot stand over grass and yell at it to grow. I think my job is to get people to do what they do best. And I just create the right environment and conditions. So I do feel that this is my biggest and hardest achievement, is to get out of the way. Because obviously, I'm a natural control freak. I think we all are, because we carry so much responsibility every day. So I forced myself to take this big step back and let people do what they do best. It is quite a horrifying feeling. It's very familiar. It's like watching my 4-year-old son with a kitchen knife this size trying to cut off a piece of cake. Everything in my body says to interfere, because I'm convinced he will cut his arm off or his hand. But I will not say something, and he will cut off the piece of cake, and he will be so proud, and I will be so proud. And this is exactly what happens with creatives. I make them better, and we make them better by getting out of the way. So I do try to listen. I don't try to pretend things I don't know. I hopefully let people know that I'm human, and then I get out of the way. I want to leave you with one final thought, something that happened to me recently, and it hit me like quite something. It was one of those creative reviews where the art director I was talking to told me, amongst other things, that she was putting her career in my hands. What a horrible statement. It just hit me how much responsibility I carry. And of course, we all carry lots of responsibilities. We need to win pitches, we need to do the best work, we need to win awards. And by doing that, we also should make our companies financially successful. But the uniquely biggest responsibility I think I have is to grow people's talent. So this is my heartfelt ode for creativity for any company. Creativity is not something that just happens when you give people tools and toys. Best is to lose fear of being wrong, because we are wrong sometimes anyway. And to lose the fear of being different and being uncomfortable. Being uncomfortable is a really great feeling. We should feel it more often. And if we are brave enough to let people do what they do best and accept them for who they are, I promise extraordinary things will happen. Thank you.